Horror and comedy are not the likeliest of bedfellows, but it works. The seminal Evil Dead series from Raimi and Campbell are one of the best examples of this in cinema. Tim Burton was also a master of bringing mirth and macabre into one place. His incredible Batman films were visually and cinematographically some of the most striking and impactful comic book adaptations still to this day. His mixture of Gothic art, caricature design and dark imagery worked perfectly for The Bat, Sleepy Hollow, and even the haunting stop-motion A Nightmare Before Christmas, a seminal release from Tim Burton at the time and still to this day. This film was a big inspiration for our next dig into the vast graveyard of video games in PlayStation exclusive this Halloween. I wanted to take a stroll down some ye olde English heritage, Victorian majesty, and all things that go bump in the night. It's time to get MediEvil. James Pond is likely not the first thing you would think of when talking about a 14th century skeletal knight fighting the undead hordes, magic overlords and stained glass windows. On the back of two hugely successful James Bond parody games that made a huge splash on the 16-bit computers in the early 90s, being flipping fantastic on the Commodore Amiga, one of the most impressive and influential computers in history, I covered in depth in my dual Amiga versus Atari ST videos. Check them out for some epic blitter rivalry. This fin-filled 2D platformer was a huge hit and had a strong sense of parody, skill and style, which stood out on computers as a unique take on the platforming classics that dominated the consoles from Nintendo and Sega. The two games could not be further apart. Lead developer Chris Sorrell was growing tired of Pond, and this new spooky title offered him and the small team from Millennium Interactive the chance to leap into the 32-bit world. Chris had joined the team after the third Pond game, where he coded the Mega Drive version himself to get the most from it. Leaving Vector Dean and joining Millennium Interactive, he was hired to help out with education software, and in doing such a bang-up job, they supported him on whatever he would love to do next. Dead Man Dan was that wish. The game was again a multi-platform release with Sega Saturn and PlayStation all in line for versions. As the company purse was light, a big push was made to secure a publisher early to aid funding of that development. As such, prototypes were made on Saturn to show to Sega. In 1996 though, Sony grew very interested in the game and later the team, with them securing it as a PSX exclusive, and then in early 1997 purchasing half of the studio, taking the MediEvil squad and game in-house to become Sony Cambridge. James Pond was not part of the acquisition. Now, this long development period saw quite a few changes from its 2+ year development cycle. One of those was the shift from a Saturn prototype to the full game being made from scratch on PS1 hardware. The other was the emerging 3D games and oh so difficult camera that we take as a given now, one of the largest problems yet to solve then. Lucky for the team, two instrumental games were about to be released that would solve most of these issues for the rest of the industry. Equally as beneficial was the as then brand new twin analog dual stock controller being in development, and MediEvil was the first UK game and team to get hands on and launch with full support. This was the final piece of the puzzle that opened the door on the team's dreams of a Ghouls and Ghosts 3D actioner with aspirations of Zelda. Now, looking back, it was, I believe, one of the biggest reasons for success and fond recollections for many of us. Not only was this a stunning land to explore, peppered with richly animated and hugely varied enemies and characters, but it felt controlled and played like something very fresh. Level variety was excellent, puzzles complex enough to demand thought, wrapped up in a control system and melee combat system that helped rather than hindered you. Going from digital to analog helped some of the more precise platform segments, but it still plays well on a D-pad, which again is easy for many of us to ignore now, but then it was among an elite group of games that had conquered the 3D game demons of control. It played immensely well with the L and R buttons used to rotate the camera when not fixed. You could attack the cadavers and keep your eyes on any impending danger yet to come. Now visually it was a real stunner that used all the hardware tricks the PlayStation had to offer. Transparency was abundant from scenery, alpha smoke, magic spells and fire, all lavish with rich contrasting colours, extreme design and high quality CGI FMV sequences to embellish Daniel Fortesque's tale of redemption and resurrection. The entire project was brought to life by Jason Wilson, being the lead artist, co-writer and even voice of Dan himself. Can you imagine a Sony first party studio donning that many hats now? Times sure have changed. Luckily, he wore his 3 hats well, with Chris taking the core programming load with his C64 and extensive Amiga skills, a testament to just how much he and fellow coders could squeeze from hardware. This carried over to the Sony machine, and this team created something special. These early days of 3D gaming meant many things taken for granted now were exciting and new. Simply having an animated 3D character was a revolution. World geometry and textures were very simple, with relatively low polygon counts. Single layered textures were applied via per face mapping, limited by the geometric construction and faces per object. As already mentioned, camera and perspective were all new challenges. As such, it was not widely known that the game was intended to be on rails, following a 2.5D spline through levels as a true evolution of a side-on platform origins of Ghouls and Ghosts. Think of it more along the lines of games like Panzer Dragoon. Now, some levels or segments still show signs of this. Thankfully, spurred on by the launch of Lara and Co during development, drove them to remove the stabilizers and deliver the free-roaming actioner we finally got.
Captain Fortesque, it's me, Canny Tim. Does the battle go well?
Design was also much harder with no 3D designer and animating tools to support such as Maya or Blender. Jason Wilson drew the characters and world on paper with biros and crayons, designing the levels to the limits of the vertex construction and even texture levels into simple tiles to help the artist craft them from the game. Set pieces, puzzles, boss battles, and even the CGI sections were all penned out in storyboard fashion, much like movies used to. Now this helps craft the camera shots, the visual effects, or even the moment-to-moment gameplay. The sheer vision Jason had is clearly visible here with a comparison from his paper art and the final game. The outcome was this pixelized version of a Tim Burton film with all the macabre Gothic art, quintessential English humour, and that oh so lovable fumbling Dan looking to redeem his legacy, even if it kills him.
Sir Daniel Fortesque, not you too. Thanks to Zarok's meddlings, I'm up to my eye sockets and lost souls who've woken from the eternal sleep. Business hasn't been this brisk since before they invented sanitation.
Now the camera options were evident all the way to the end, and with the in-game debug mode enabling you to test these out with a variety of choices, including free roam and field of view choices, allows you to understand just how much they played around with these aspects. The excellent use of memory here, with indoor sections being fully loaded into RAM and then warped to instantly when entering. This clever use of map design and space kept loading to a minimum of all times, and is a huge game with excellent memory management and loading times. Using the debug camera system, you can see the level construction of each themed world. Great use of sprite effects, textured transparencies on water, and frugal triangle count makes for an impressive PS1 debut. You can literally move through the levels and see how they laid everything out. By hiding these sections, these indoor rooms on the far edge of the map, it means you could never see it from a distance, even though the level of detail was severely cool once you move back and forth. But it's a great use of that memory and allowed it to be drawn all at once when the level loaded, and then you can jump in and out of those indoor sections. Clever little touch on a game, and actually made it feel far closer to its cartridge inspirations of the generation before than the 32-bit CD-ROM that we were now used to, which delivered slow loading. Now the limits of the PS1 are evident, with the affine texture mapped environments warping often as vertex point popping from convex to concave. The lack of a depth buffer causes perception issues, with characters popping behind and in front of scenery, but the Software Z solution does work well. The team use it alongside with vertex lighting, Guru shading to help the textures on Dan to convey him entering darker areas or around light sources to light him up, like an early light map solution. The use of colour, additional texture mapped detail, exaggerated character design, complex levels that sprawl and intertwine. Even shortcuts can be found to give you a faster path back to an area or key item. This, in this sense, is really the original Demon Souls or Dark Souls. The combat though is not that intuitive and it isn't that satisfying overall, but the animation is another high point. The gangly, awkward jaunt or run of Dan gives him a comedic charm like a pumpkin-inspired Charlie Chaplin or Norman Wisdom.
My name's Mitch. I'm the animator for the MediEvil team. Basically, I do all the quirky little characters that make the game what it is. Take the characters, place them into an environment, and generally add my own characteristics to them or people that I've seen. For larger characters such as Dan himself, he's got about 30-odd animations, so he takes a lot longer.
Clumsy swings or jumps with legs hanging below him like two pieces of strings. The enemies are equally lavished in colour and charm, with pumpkins growing from the ground, fat farmers popping out of hay bales, or rabid skeletons attacking on board those ghostly vessels. The huge boss battles provide a grand climax to each segment and fit the relevant themes perfectly. The penultimate boss before Zarok is more pirate than the Chuck, me hearties.
Good! I want that scurvy dog dangling from yon yardarm by his bowels.
The game runs at an approximate 512 by 288 progressive output on the antique PlayStation 1 at 25 FPS here in Europe or 30 FPS in NTSC regions, which maintains it pretty well. With the PlayStation being a frame buffered machine, it meant tearing could occur if the output was not aligned to the refresh rate, just like modern consoles and PC. MediEvil was one such title that did tear on occasion during play and heavy combat, along with minor frame stutters caused from the constant data streaming and audio access, which can be better or worse depending on your CD laser and disc quality. Now, tearing was a much bigger problem in the visually improved sequel though, but in a total playthrough it runs very well indeed for such a demanding 3D title in those burgeoning 32-bit days.
Now, the audio was a huge part of the game and is a great turning point for video game music drawing closer to film. The inspiration is clear though. Talented duo Andrew Barnabas and Paul Arnold, better known as Bob and Barn, worked wonders here with a Danny Elfman inspired orchestral score, but it was all created from the synthesizers rather than the Philharmonic Orchestra. It portrayed a wonderful mix of haunting strings, deep trumpets and comedic pacing that matched the on-screen action. This balance of visual, horror and humour would not be as impactful without this incredibly deep and varied score. It manifested a grander scale to all proceedings, a much bigger budget game than it actually was. They did such a good job, they ran the entire Sony sound department until the PS2 was about to launch. If you can, sit down and play the PS1 original and indulge yourself in one of the finest soundtracks from the 32-bit era that still holds up today.
The variety the game offers and pacing made it quite unlike anything else at the time, and in many ways it's still a unique experience with an unmistakable English humour, excellent pacing and a devious difficulty that really tests the best players. Later levels and bosses are incredibly tough and unforgiving, which can test your dexterity, awareness and patience, but you get much satisfaction when you do. The cheat mode does come in handy when you no longer have endless hours to practice like you did back in the day, and the mix of level orientated puzzle progression, exploration and secret zones, a varied mix of levels, enemies and a large map to enable replay and quick travel, along with the many references to classics of the time such as the Donkey Kong themed boulder jumping early level to pop culture in ILM's famous CGI stained glass knight reference from the young Sherlock Holmes. Tim Burton and Danny Elfman are the biggest muses though within the art and sound, but a comedic Monty Python-esque Halloween retro platformer you could do far worse than getting MediEvil come October 31st. I thank you all for watching, and if you reach the end of this, then I really thank you. And if you like my retro, modern, tech or PC based videos and articles along with my IGN performance reviews, then you can help by hitting the sub and bell button, commenting, sharing and returning soon for more modern, horror, retro and technology focused goodness. Until then, stay cool, stay spooky this Halloween.
You will never leave this domain.